Greetings, this is Celebration. My name is John Savers, I'm your host, and today we will conclude our series on diversity. We have entered upon this particular series at the impel of President Clinton and others who have voiced a strong opinion in this regard, that frank discussion should be had and a broadened understanding. And with such figures as Mr. Jesse Jackson chiming in, calling for our academics and scientists and so forth to plunge into this matter and so forth. Now, I don't know how many current academic and scientific types have plunged into it, but we did find some in the past to adduce some evidence and so forth, which is seldom seen and I think helps to round out the picture. We oppose, of course, angularities, irregularities, preferring a rounded picture to a slanted or pointed one, which tends to be tendentious and establishmentarian. Now, we have a little trouble with our fellowship with the establishmentarian types, as we feel that they have ulterior motives. I myself am denounced by such people, often in D.C. and whatnot, for having an irresponsible voice or being irresponsible and so forth like this. I can't imagine anybody who is sound saying that fact, law, and truth, the pronouncement, the seeking thereof and whatnot is irresponsible. But apparently, if it's not something that they approve of, you may well get this. Now, we have looked at this particular matter carefully. We are in favor, by the way, of diversity. We are in favor of a global diversity, heterogeneity. We look for a local homogeneity and local control, and that is the viewpoint we at Celebration have and support. We do not think that this is the viewpoint, however, of the elites, the leadership of America. We feel that they, in fact, are working gradually, slowly, perhaps not always aware of it, toward a world without white people. We decry this. We do not think this is a good idea, and we reject the policies which tend to move us in that direction. However, let it be said loudly that I speak for myself only. I'm not a spokesperson for white people. I don't think very many white people join me in this particular point of view. Certainly, it is unpopular with the establishment types and unpopular with many blacks who have been co-opted by the establishment and also by the newer immigrants and so forth. So you can find yourself rather isolated and unpopular quickly, but we are not daunted by this here at Celebration, and I particularly have put forth my views as forthrightly as I could. So on this particular ground, let us open with comments from our president, shall we? The Clinton administration has acted speedily on the dual goals outlined at the latest Bilderberg meeting, eliminating racial and ethnic distinctions. Just days after a Bilderberg participant said intermarrying means racial and cultural distinctions will blissfully blur, leading Americans to accept a world without borders, President Clinton picked up the theme from the Oval Office. We want to become a multiracial, multi-ethnic society, Clinton told a group of black journalists. This will arguably be the third great revolution, to prove we literally can live without having a dominant European culture, Clinton said. Clinton then went to California to celebrate because the state is about to lose its majority white status. Within the next 3 years, here in California, No single race or ethnic group will make up a majority of the state's population, Clinton said. A half century from now, there will be no majority race in America. Bilderberg orders to Clinton, himself a member, were transmitted officially by Samuel Berger, assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, who represented the White House at the secret meeting of the world's elite. This is a citation from the Spotlight, August 4, 1997, page 18. Now, the Clinton view should be considered in conjunction with the revised view of 32-degree Freemason Harry Truman, who voiced the opinion, his reformed, remodeled opinion, that America should, its demographics should express those of the globe. And it is this notion which altered the laws in regard to immigration with once a bias toward the European people and now a bias toward the non-European people. But at any rate, let us consider the following. We want to kind of recapitulate a little bit of the world without white people theme, which is the theme of this particular program series. Many black people have assumed, thought wrongly that I was aiming this particular program at them, but I was not aiming any kind of criticism at them per se, but rather upon their actions vis-a-vis the white population, and also the nature of the species and what could be expected by blending. But at any rate, I want to refocus now upon the question of malice toward white people, and let's go and take a look at this further. With time, I would hope that the image of the German body politic might be changed from exclusively white and Christian to brown, yellow, and black, Muslim, and Jewish. In short, the conception of German identity must be transformed. This is a citation from the Barnes Review, Volume 5, Number 3, May-June 1999, page 34, citing Jeffrey M. Peck. Now, some of you may say, well, hey, that's Germany. What has that got to do with America? Well, I have also in this series tried to bring up the notion that every single country in which the European-derived people dwell is under assault and of a demographic type amongst others, and that is true of Australia and South Africa and all the European countries in America. Canada will be a minority white country before the year 2000, I think, and so forth. And it should be well to keep in mind that many of the people who are coming to the European countries and America and so forth come from countries which are like 100% racially separate. We think of countries such as China, or even countries such as Guatemala and whatnot. These people can come to this country and come when they may. They can always say, well, our culture and our people are preserved in the old country, whether it be China or Guatemala or what have you. But the European people are being deprived of any alternate, and it is clear that somebody does not want them around. Let's consider this further. We will aid the Negroes to rise in prominence in every walk of life, in the professions, and in the world of sports and entertainment. With this prestige, the Negro will be able to intermarry with the whites and begin a process which will deliver America to our Jewish communist cause. This is a citation from God's Covenant People, chapter 10, page 300, citing Israel Cohen, a racial program for the 20th century, 1912, cited by U.S. Representative Thomas G. Abernathy and published in the Congressional Record, 1957, page 8559. Well, that is a fairly interesting way to begin this century, and along the way, other views popped up which seemed to be a little bit of this kind. Now, it should be stated that after World War II, a Polish Jew named, as I recall, Raphael Lemkin, wrote a piece of legislation for the United Nations in regard to racial matters, and that has become the sort of law of the land of the world, as it were, increasingly. But it is this law which has engendered most of the changes in the laws in the United States, and particularly Plessy versus Ferguson being overturned, and this by the Warren Court, dominated by Freemasons and so forth. But I think the real reason that all this transpired is that the gathering to formulate the Charter of the United Nations, or the treaty in San Francisco, led by such people as Alger Hiss and others, in point of fact, correlates with the Founding Fathers gathering in Philadelphia. That is, that they were basically rewriting a new country, one of a global nature, and subsuming the United States of America into that global confederation or grouping union, and that the laws of that global union then became their constitution, their charter, then became the real law of the land. But because of fear of resistance by many of our people, many of them tested war veterans, they did not want to be forthright about what they were doing, but used other pretexts, and with the use of Durashic interpretations and so forth of a gain from the Talmud, the Supreme Court justices were able to come up with interpretations entirely creative and non-logical, array the Constitution to overturn many laws and to attack Christianity itself also. So with this in mind, in 1963, the then editor of Commentary, Norman Podhoretz, proposed to solve the problem of race by making color irrelevant, and suggested the wholesale merging of the two races, black and white, is the most desirable alternate for everyone concerned. This is a citation from the Spotlight, September 1, 1997, page 14. Well, at this time, I'd like to direct your attention to the following matter, which I think is not too well known and pretty important, so please attend. Greetings, my children. You have been called here to recapitulate the principal steps of our new program, the goal for which we have striven so concertedly for 3,000 years is at last within our reach, and because its fulfillment is so apparent, it behooves us to increase our efforts and our caution tenfold. You remember the success of our propaganda campaign during the 1930s, which aroused anti-American passions in Germany at the same time we were arousing anti-German passions in America, a campaign which culminated in the Second World War. A similar propaganda campaign is now being waged intensively throughout the world. We are counting heavily on reports of anti-Semitic outrages in Russia to help whip up indignation in the United States and produce a front of solidarity against the Soviet power. Simultaneously, to demonstrate to Americans the reality of anti-Semitism, we will advance through new sources large sums of money to outspokenly anti-Semitic elements in America to increase their effectiveness, and we shall stage anti-Semitic outbreaks in several of their larger cities. We will openly reveal our identity with the races of Asia and Africa. I can state with assurance that the last generation of white children is now being born. Our control commissions will, in the interests of peace and wiping out interracial tensions, forbid the whites to mate with whites. The white women must cohabit with members of the dark races, the white men with black women. Thus, the white race will disappear, for mixing the dark with the white means the end of the white man, and our most dangerous enemy will become only a memory. We shall embark upon an era of 10,000 years of peace and plenty, the Pax Judaica, and our race will rule undisputed over the world. Our superior intelligence will easily enable us to retain mastery over a world of dark peoples. There will be no more religions. Not only will the existence of a priest class remain a constant danger to our rule, but belief in an afterlife would give spiritual strength to irreconcilable elements in many countries and enable them to resist us. We will, however, retain the rituals and customs of Judaism as the mark of our hereditary ruling caste, strengthening our racial laws so that no Jew will be allowed to marry outside our race, nor will any stranger be accepted by us. To convince you of the certainty of that leadership, let me point out to you how we have turned all of the inventions of the white man into weapons against him. His printing presses and radios are the mouthpieces of our desires, and his heavy industry manufactures the instruments which he sends out to arm Asia and Africa against him. Our interests in Washington are greatly extending the Point 4 program for developing industry in backward areas of the world, so that after the industrial plants and cities of Europe and America are destroyed by atomic warfare, the whites can offer no resistance against the large masses of the dark races who will maintain an unchallenged technological superiority. And so, with this vision of world victory before you, go back to your countries and intensify your good work until that approaching day when Israel will reveal herself in all her glorious destiny as the light of the world. Now, this is a reprint of part of a speech given by Rabbi Emanuel Rabinovich before a special meeting of the Emergency Council of European Rabbis in Budapest, Hungary, January 12, 1952. Commander William Guy Carr of the Royal Canadian Navy received this obscure report from the Canadian Intelligence Service. The text of this speech originally appeared in the American publication Common Sense, New Jersey. It was made available to them by Mr. Eustace Mullins, researcher and author of several books. Now, let us consider a certain aspect of World War II, which, again, as I mentioned earlier, has had a feedback onto the laws of the United States of America by its membership in the United Nations. So please consider. One of the first accusations against the Germans of the mass murder of Jews in wartime Europe was made by the Polish Jew Raphael Lemkin in his book Axis Rule in Occupied Europe, published in New York in 1944. Somewhat coincidentally, Lemkin was later to draw up the UN Genocide Convention, which seeks to outlaw racialism. This is a citation which appeared in Did 6 Million Really Die? Page 7. Well, now, people, let us get back, if we may, to the states and what is going on here in regard to this animosity toward white people. And in this regard, I offer the following citation. In the 21st century, and that's not far off, racial and ethnic groups in the U.S. will outnumber whites for the first time. The browning of America will alter everything in society, from politics and education to industry, values, and culture. Now, this citation is from God's Covenant People, chapter 11, page 322, citing Time magazine, Beyond the Melting Pot, April 19, 1990. And furthermore, and perhaps in the same vein, consider this quotation, if you will. Nothing will be more rare in the future than a white person, and nothing may be less important than the white man's ways. This is a citation from God's Covenant People, chapter 11, page 322, quoting Jim Dator, political scientist, Chicago Tribune. Now, I would like to make the comment that there have been little signs along the way that this is the establishment view and thinking. It is to be found in Luce's version of Time magazine and also in the present Edgar Bronfman version. But at any rate, I remember reading an article in the early 1970s in Time magazine relating to events in New Zealand, events of conflict between the European-derived people and the Maori. And at that point in time, the article directed at the Prime Minister got from him the comment that he thought that in about 100 years or so, they would all be a little darker. Well, this was an interesting commentary to me, and I was amazed actually when I heard almost the exact wording used by the Princeton University head of the SAT programming, who was appearing on the Larry King talk show, radio talk show, back in, as I recall, the early 90s. I do have that tape in my possession. But at any rate, he voiced almost the exact same wording as that of the New Zealand Prime Minister back in the early 70s. I immediately made that association, and it immediately reinforced in my mind an idea of a global establishment position being pushed forward here. But he too, the Princeton man, said that in 100 years or so we'd probably all be a few shades darker. Well, maybe so, but at any rate, the capitulation to this particular scheme of things, I think, is rather cowardly and knavish. I remember the many commentaries along the way by people such as Professor Teller and by Professor Kissinger and by Professor the big brother Brzezinski, all to the effect that the United States of America was ultimately a loser vis-a-vis the USSR, and we'd be best off making the best deal we possibly can and submit and so forth like this. In other words, the ideology of the loser. It just makes me sick that such people are in positions of power and leadership in this country, but not only are they in positions, but they have been in positions for most of this particular century. And apparently, unless something will be done, will continue until they have made their monster. Now, I say monster because I believe that this whole thing was foreseen by the great Mary Bysshe Shelley in her Frankenstein. I see her as a kind of a prophet, a seer, in which she sort of metaphorically imagined the future. She may have understood from her meetings with Freemasons and others of the so-called enlightened group, this game plan, this scheme, much as Orwell understood finally from his meetings with socialists and Masons and so forth what their game plan was, and gave a warning in 1984, Animal Farm and so forth. Mary Bysshe Shelley's book Frankenstein envisioned a new man, as it were, made from old parts, stitched together, and this particular creature apparently was working quite well, but as it was ungodly, it was opposed to God and so forth in its very essence, it naturally came up a cropper, and dissolution began, and I expect the same thing to happen with these people's new man also in their new world and whatnot. Now, it should be mentioned in passing also, I think, that the vision of Mr. John Daniel and his Skull and the Beast, that the city of London more or less represented the harlot mystery of Revelation, and that its allies in the United States and elsewhere are all part of that system. As I pointed out, the ruling class of England is now an Edomite British confab, and I wanted to call to your mind also that in the Bible, the Lord God Almighty says of Edom, Edom will build up, but I will cast down. So I expect this whole system of the British and their allies, a harlot mystery, if you will, to be thrown down by the Lord God Almighty, and they'll be weeping for their dainties and their fine morsels and their soft life. Also, now, I would like to call to your attention also, since I have talked about Time Magazine a little bit, and we have another quotation from Time Magazine, that Time Magazine is so enthusiastic about this trend of creating the new man, Homo Blendo, that it had as a front page of one of its magazine issues a projected new person, what we will look like, as they put it on the front of the page. And in that particular page, I think it came out to appear somewhat like maybe a darker European type. But at any rate, this is all projection. I will say that National Lampoon, the amusing kind of satiric comic outfit back in the 80s, when they indeed put out some amusing stuff, thanks to B.J. O'Rourke and others. They did an issue on that subject, just sort of putting together a conglomerate man with little pieces of each ethnic or racial group put together, you know, a nose from this group, an eye from that, creating an abomination, as it were, equal to that of the vision of Mary Bysshe Shelley. But at any rate, it does seem to be afoot all around, everywhere, signs of this and so forth. Well, that's it. That's all she wrote. We're out of time. This is Celebration. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you again next time.